This is the Lombardi Line with former NFL executive Michael Lombardi. Now here is your host, Stormy Buonantony, on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
You can't bet against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Yeah. We get it. Welcome into the Lombardi Line presented by DraftKings.
Where are the Kleenexes?
Yeah. Unfortunately, they're over there. I am in black because I am in mourning.
I feel bad for you. I
today.
really do. You were the first person I thought of when Hardman caught that ball. Yeah, it's tough. These are hard ones.
Yeah.
These really are. And, there's always a point in the game where – and I would watch games when I was in the league. We got to win the game right here. And there were a few of those moments where San Francisco had a chance. I don't understand the negativity towards Kyle Shanahan. Again, I think a lot of it goes back to people just think it's easy to waltz into this game. Like, it's no big deal. And we got so many experts that, can manage a game from their couch that it's kind of ridiculous. But look, it is what it is. There were certainly opportunities. I think Kyle can learn from this game and move forward. Right? I think that's going to be the key because it's interesting. The other sideline, Stormy, Andy Reid went through a lot of this himself. A lot of coaches go through this. They kind of have to realize that there's a certain level you have to gain to get somewhere. And so, I think this will be a great learning experience for Kyle. And they'll be back.
So that's the thing. Like, I understand the, being upset or frustrated about things that Kyle Shanahan did in terms of in the third quarter when you have the 3 and outs and 8 of those 9 plays are pass plays when you've already had problems and been known for abandoning the run in your previous Super Bowl appearances. Why are we doing that now when the best player on your team is a running back? I understand the questions about what happened in overtime and taking the ball first and then hearing all of these reports come out about how the 49ers players didn't even know that there were different adjusted overtime rules this season. So there are a number of things from a Kyle Shanahan standpoint I understand being upset about, but it's the people that are saying they'll never get over the hump or Shanahan's never going to get a ring now because of XYZ. That's what I disagree with. We don't know. And to your point, he can learn from this and hopefully does and will.
There's so many moments in the game. They get the interception to start the second half. Andy Reid manages the middle 8 really good on the front end where he gets the ball with over 4 minutes to go. He only gets 3 points, cuts the lead down, right? Now he's got a chance to tie the game coming out of the second half, and Mahomes throws the interception. They have the ball at the Kansas City 44, and, they can't get anything. They get a penalty, 2nd and 15. I think when you go back and watch this game, second down, the second down call sheet, we talked about this all week. Kyle Shanahan's second down call sheet needed to stay out of 3rd and long. And it was all over the television yesterday. They averaged 3rd and long. They were over 9 yards in 3rd and long. And that's not how you're going to play Steve Spagnuolo. Spagnuolo was determined to attack him on second down to create the 3rd and longs because Spagnuolo knew that if I make this a drop-back pass game on 3rd down, where it's 3rd and long, where he doesn't have the chance to hand it off to McCaffrey or run something quick out of a West Coast, it favors me. And I think that's what happened. So, look, there's a lot of areas that you really can dig into. They blow the protection on the 3rd down in the red zone. I mean, they got one guard sliding left. They got the other guard sliding right. You can't blow a protection. Look, I lost the tuck game because we had a mental mistake, right? Frank Middleton went the wrong way, and we don't get the first down. And the next thing you know, they make the comeback back. It's those little things. This game to me is I said this on the podcast, this game is about one of my favorite quotes by Marcus Aurelius is the secret to all victory lies in the organization of the non-obvious. And this game was the non-obvious. It's going to be the obvious is going to be, Kyle blew it with his calls. The obvious is going to be Purdy couldn't lead him to victory. That's completely false, right? There's some non-obvious things that have to get corrected. And if you're a great coach like Kyle is to get his team here, he'll correct those and move forward.
Yeah, I think for me as a fan, what's been the most frustrating is that they felt like the better team throughout the game. The 49ers did to me. And there were so many instances where they just were they had so many opportunities to win the game and then didn't. Like, you think about even from the very start in that opening drive where they're gashing Kansas City, driving down the field, and then Christian McCaffrey, of all people, has a super uncharacteristic fumble. You think about the muffed punt that sets up the MVS touchdown, Moody's missed extra point, not using George Kittle. Like, there were just so many areas where...
Yeah. The Kittle one's the mystery to me. I got to watch the tape today, the All-22, when it gets loaded up there to see it. But here's the other thing I think that Kyle has to learn from the game, which is the non-obvious again. And you can put them all in a category. So when you are a zone concept defense like they are, and why are they a zone concept defense? Because they have really good pass rushers. So let's go back to the New York Football Giants when they had Lawrence Taylor. I asked Belichick once, I said, Bill, where's your play sheet? This is when I first got to know Bill. Because he used to have this starter jacket on and his hands were always in his pocket. And he said, I got Lawrence Taylor. What do I need a play sheet for? It's flip cover 2, right? Well, when you have Lawrence Taylor, you can play cover 2, and it's hard to really, it's hard for them to move the ball. Well, the 49ers have a great front, and they can play a lot of zone behind it, and that front wears you down as the game goes on. In Super Bowls, having been there and experienced this, the defensive fronts get tired. The game's longer. It's harder. Everybody's going 100 miles an hour. It's hot. It's humid. Even though you can get a lot of time to have IVs at halftime, look at the fourth quarter by both teams. Okay, let's just go through the fourth quarter. The Niners, touchdown, field goal, field goal. That was their fourth quarter in overtime. The Chiefs, touchdown, field goal, touchdown. It was because the fronts are tired. And so now this leads me to the non-obvious. So if I'm Kyle Shanahan, I'm flying back to the Bay today, I'm saying to myself, we've got to really have a better plan for Blitz Zero. But more than anything, we have to have a better plan defensively from a scheme standpoint. We lose a huge lead, a 10-point lead, because we're playing cover 3 against the Chiefs the first game, and Mahomes, and we get tired and we can't rush. This game is the same thing. When we had a blitz, we couldn't blitz effectively. So it really comes back to you have to be multiple on defense. You have to be like a baseball pitcher. You have to have a fastball, you have to have a curve, and you have to have a changeup. And the Niners just had the fastball. Eventually, that pitcher gets hit. And I think that's really the conversation is how do we change our defense to still highlight the front, but be able to play on the back end with more man coverage. And then when we have to blitz, we don't let Kelsey run free.
Sure.
When we have to blitz, we don't let Rashee Rice run across the field. To me, that's the game.
Well, and they did credit that defense, especially in the first half. Travis Kelce only had 1 catch and 1 yard. But yes, exactly. In the second half, obviously we saw some changes there. And that's something big picture that the 49ers are going to have to rein in. But I was largely, especially given how much criticism that we've given to Steve Wilks and the defensive line particularly, they were a lot better than I anticipated. And Chase Young must have been listening to our show or something.
For the first half he did. For the second half, I'm not sure he paid much attention to us.
You talk about being tired, right? And long drives and all of that. When we get to the position where we go to overtime and Kyle Shanahan wins the coin toss and elects to take the ball first, I thought in my mind it was because the defense was tired.
Right. Well, they just played. Think about this. Nobody's written this about when they critique Kyle. They had just played 23 plays. They had a 12-play drive. They gave up a field goal. Then it was an 11-play drive. They gave up a field. So they were on the field so Steve Wilks had just called 23 calls.
Yes.
You don't have that many calls on your call sheet.
So the only reason that I bring this up is because, yes, I am aware of that, and that was the thought process that I was thinking. Kyle Shanahan didn't say that postgame,
right,
which is what I have issue with and what I want to ask you about. But let's take a listen to Kyle and his thought process on taking the ball first in OT.
It's just something we talked about with, that none of us have a ton of experience of it, but we went through all the analytics and talked with those guys, and we decided to be better. We wanted the ball third. If both teams matched and scored, we wanted to be the ones who had the chance to go win, and we got that field goal, so we knew we had to hold them to at least to a field goal, and if we did, then we felt it was in our hands after that.
Yeah. I mean, look, let me say this about the Niners, right? One of the big things that drove Jim Harbaugh crazy was their propensity to want to have analytics involved. So I know they have a strong analytical department. Now, they're running for the hills, I'm sure, with this decision. But I think the defense was tired. Like I said, they've just played 23 plays. They had a chance to score 7 on the 1. Andy Reid comes back out and says afterwards, our strategy was simply this. We were going to go for 2 to never allow the third possession. Got that? Yeah. And the play they called. And so when you have that as a strategy, right? When you have that as a strategy, you practice more 2-point plays. Okay, so that play that they ran to Hardeman probably came from the 2-point section on the call sheet. What's our best 2-point player? We got to have it. We got to make a play here. And so because the strategy going in by Reid was he was going to go for it on a 2-point play, he was more prepared for that. I think, to me, you certainly can question the decision, because when you defer, again, you're playing Patrick Mahomes. And I don't know what the analytics from San Francisco said that Kyle's referring to, but I would rather play Mahomes in a 3-down game than a 4-down game.
Yes.
That to me was what it came down to. But I know my defense is exhausted, right? I know. So Mahomes is going to go right down the field on us. They're tired.
Yes, and I think that people would give Shanahan more of a break if he just said that. But instead he's saying, we wanted to get the ball third. Why are we thinking that far ahead? Like, that's where I have issue. And unfortunately, too, as a fan, like, I just think of the end of the game when they can't get that first down to keep the drive going and they have to kick a field goal, and you know that Mahomes is getting...
Too. They watch the play. Like, the one guard, the left guard tries to move to the right, the center moves left, and the right guard moves out. They didn't even block Jones. Yeah. So it was clearly, look, their line coach, Chris Forrester, is a very good coach. And so, like, they cover that. They blew the protection. They blew it. That's just what it is. It was the right call, bad execution. And unfortunately, you lose a Super Bowl over that. That's the overtime and the third down calls. Those are going to be the calls that Kyle are going to regret in terms of the second down call. We'll talk about this when we come back. When they had the ball in Kansas City territory, when they're down, when it was a 16-16 game, that was the moment of the game to win.
So much opportunity missed, it felt like, for San Francisco, who falls to Kansas City 25-22. The Chiefs get their third ring, 2 of them now, at the expense of the San Francisco 49ers.
The appointments are lined up.
You waiting for somebody in there?
Got an appointment. And it's not about what you want to hear, but what you need to hear.
It's not personal. It's strictly business. It's time you and me had a private talk, Winger. Step into my office.
It's Step Into My Office with Michael Lombardi. Mr. Lombardi, we'll see you now.
Okay, Michael, let's get to it.
Yeah.
Kyle Shanahan getting a lot of flack today, rightfully so in a lot of areas, but let's go through it. Shanahan fell to 0-2 as a head coach in Super Bowls, 0-3 overall, and his team has had a 10-plus lead in all 3 games. Hold on, let me do it. Blew a 25-point lead in Super Bowl 51, a 10-point lead in 54, and a 10-point lead yesterday. We also have to take into account the play calling early in the third quarter, and of course the decision or rationale for the decision to take the ball first in overtime. So a lot of layers. How can Shanahan get over the hump and rid himself of this choke artist moniker, Michael?
Well, I think all he has to do is look to the other sideline. Andy Reid, at 42 years old, went 11-5, got his team to a conference championship, lost it. Then it took him 4 more years to get to the NFC championship game, which he finally won, and then he lost the Super Bowl. Choke artist. Okay, so he starts his career in Philadelphia in 1999. He never wins a Super Bowl. He's run out of town after a season of 8-8, and then he went 4-12, but he got fired. And he never won. And then he went to Kansas City and said, Andy will never win because he can't manage the clock. He's a choke artist come playoff time. And now you just lost to a guy. So all the things they've said about Andy, we are now saying about you, Kyle, which is completely, it wasn't true about Andy, and it's not true about you. But what I think you can learn more than anything is figuring out why we lost and what we need to do to win. And I think if you analyze your 2 Super Bowl losses, forget the Atlanta one. Why they blame you for that, I have no idea. You were the offensive coordinator. You weren't the head coach. So that should never be on your record. However, what I think you have to do is figure out, why did we lose the fourth quarter of 2 Super Bowls? And you lost because, as great as your defensive line is, it got tired. And it happens at every Super Bowl. It happens. So you're going to have to expand your portfolio defensively. You're going to have to commit yourself to being more multiple defensively. And you're going to have to change the way you call defense in the regular season. You're going to have to create a draft concept to draft more man-to-man corners as opposed to zone corners. Because when a game comes on the line, we got to play man and we've got to blitz people.
Quickly, does this bring down your power ranking in terms of head coaches where Kyle Shanahan sits?
No, but I think what it does is it just opens the door. Like all coaches, like nobody's prepared to be a head coach. Andy Reid's first year on the job, he's 41 years old. He went 5-11. The next year, that's when they started getting going. As you get going, Andy didn't win his first Super Bowl until he was 61 years old. That's 20 years of being a head coach in the National Football League. But nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody says anything about Andy Reid struggled for 20 before he won his first Super Bowl. All right? Like, that's all Kyle's got to do. And he's got to, he's got his dad there to give him advice. And look at this profile. Just understand that, hey, we stand in front of the team every week, every offseason. We have to improve. Guess what? The coaches have to improve too. The scouting has to improve. The player development, everything has to improve when you fall short of your goal.
Well, let's talk to Andy Reid here for a little bit, because he has joined a very exclusive club of head coaches with 3+ Super Bowls, including Bill Belichick, Chuck Noll, Bill Walsh, Joe Gibbs. And he told reporters, because everybody keeps asking if he's going to retire, he said, I haven't even thought about it. Quote, I'm old, but I'm not that old. So how, in your mind, should Andy Reid approach this offseason? And is there something to going out on top?
No, there's something about when you feel like you don't enjoy the process. Reid loves the process of work. He loves it. I love
that he was like, I haven't thought about it.
I said this on the pod today. I said it on Mitch and Paulie. What would he do? Is he going to become a food critic for Las Vegas? What's Andy going to do? What is he going to do?
I would pay to see that. Can we get some more Andy Reid off-season content?
What is he going to do? We're going to, okay, Andy, why don't you go down to Sinatra's at the Wynn and tell us what you think? That's a 5-star. We'll go to Barry's over here. That's 5-star. Come on. I'm probably, or is he going to join Guy Fieri on the Food Network and go diners, drive-in, and dive? Come on. The guy's a hell of a coach. What this whole generation misses is, because it's all about who's young. So I love it. Belichick stopped Sean McVay. Belichick's a bad coach. You should hire every one of Sean McVay's assistants. Nobody talks about that. Experience matters. I just gave you an example of experience. Andy Reid, 41, first-time head coach. It takes him till he's 61 to win a Super Bowl. That experience of all those years, of all those losses that have accumulated, where he got to conference championships but couldn't get over the hump, that were all learning experiences for him.
From choke artist to Hall of Fame coach.
Now he's on the Hall of Fame.
Yep. Oh, speaking of Hall of Fame, how'd you like the comment from Jim Nantz when he was talking about all the Hall of Fame inductees this year and saying, Brent Musburger, just got to get him that Pete
We
Rozelle
have to
award.
Get Brent in the Hall of Fame. I think it's really important. I love that Dan Patrick mentioned it on his show.
So he's going to write a letter to the Hall?
I would love that. I hope he has more power. I wrote a book about it. If somebody would read that, and I hope, and a lot of people would understand, as we asked Brent yesterday on the air about walking up Park Avenue and talking to the commissioner about the whole NFL Today. But I think when you watch this show, the NFL Today with Brent, I think you really get an understanding of how powerful that show was. Not a lot of people today can understand that we didn't have scores. We didn't have any programming during the week. We had 3 channels. It was like you were barren to find any information. And that show was the beacon of light for you to understand the NFL.
How about Brock Purdy? He had 255 yards and a touchdown against the Chiefs, led 5 scoring drives in all, but couldn't score a touchdown in overtime to get that win. After the loss now, Purdy's 21-6 as a starter, including the postseason, made back-to-back NFC championships and a Super Bowl. But there's going to be all the offseason talk about, is Purdy the guy? What can he do to improve and take the step as a franchise quarterback in San Francisco?
The thing I would tell Brock Purdy is take a week off, go back to Iowa, go to Phoenix, go to Arizona, wherever you're living, and rest. Get underneath. And then when you can come back and you're allowed in that facility, you start training for next year. Get your body bigger, get your body stronger, improve on every aspect. Spend 4 hours a day watching tape. Go spend time with Tom Brady. Ask Brady what it takes to be a great player. Fly to Los Angeles. Really commit yourself to your career. Because everybody who has an opinion on Brock Purdy has no idea how good Brock Purdy is. He does. And he's going to be able to take the Niners as far as his appetite for competitive stamina allows them. And he has to set the floor for the entire team. He's got to be the hardest worker. He's got to be the one driving it. He's got to be everything there. And then he can improve his mental at the line of scrimmage game, which is going to take his game to another level.
I like that you use that word competitive stamina, because let's use that now with Patrick Mahomes on the other side, because maybe for Purdy, a little bit easier to stay motivated when you're hungry to get that win and to be taken seriously as a franchise QB. Patrick Mahomes, 28 years old, he's already got 3 Super Bowls. He's feeling pretty good. How can he maintain that competitive stamina and get the 3-peat or continue to develop his legacy?
Well, I think because he knows as great as today is, it can turn on you in a minute. You can turn on. He's not happy. He's taking the game. Look at Russell Wilson. Look how quickly that narrative changed. And I think ultimately you go away, you celebrate, you start a date, whether it's March 15th, whether it's March 20th, whether it's 10 days from now. But basically, you've got to put this season behind you and go on to the next season. That's what makes the NFL so hard. You know, everybody today came to work in the National Football League, and they all said, we're 0-0. The season started today in the NFL. Everybody thinks they got a chance to go to the Super Bowl. Everybody thinks they got a great plan for the offseason. And so if you don't take that same mentality, you're going to fall behind. You know you got Harbaugh in the division. You know you got Sean Payton in there. The competition is going to continue to rise. Josh Allen's sitting there saying, what do I have to do to get on this stage?
And, you know, something tells me that celebrating Super Bowls doesn't get old.
No, it doesn't get old, but you got to find a way to get back into it. And the only person that can do it, this is what made Brady so good, is the leader of the team, Belichick. He could care less about what happened yesterday. He's about tomorrow. He's about what's next, the next games, the next championship. So I think Reid's that way, and I think Mahomes is that way too.
And you know, as a former GM, how much has to go in to make that roster continue to be competitive year after year.
Yeah.
Let's say we're talking to Brett Veach today. Kansas City has a ton of upcoming free agents this offseason, including Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed. What should he be prioritizing this offseason?
I think he should be prioritizing everything that wins championships. More defensive linemen, better offensive line, find skill, find bargains, don't overspend. I mean, that's what you can't do. Look what happened to Philly. Look what happened to Philly. Oh, we're going to bring Slay back. Okay, we're going to bring Slay back. We're going to bring Bradbury back. Overpay for them. Don't repair the linebackers. Defensive front, not as in good shape. You can't get complacent. You have to constantly ask yourself, is the value of this player worth coming back? Remember when is the lowest form of conversation. And I know these guys are really good, but we may have to get part of it. We cannot fall in love.
We've only got 30 seconds, but what holes will John Lynch need to fill to get the Niners over the hump?
I think he needs man-to-man corners. I think he needs to find, and he needs to get the defensive line to play at a higher level.
Yeah. I agree with you 100%. So close, but so far for the San Francisco 49ers twice now in the last handful of years. Both of those losses coming at the hands of this Kansas City Chiefs team, which just goes to show how impactful this group really, really is, regardless of who they've had out there on the field. Let's dive into a little bit of NFL draft conversation. Speaking of us closing the door on the 2023-24 season, 24-25 is right here, ladies and gentlemen. Russell Brown, NFL draft analyst at fantasypros.com, also writes for the Lions Wire and hosts the Detroit Lions podcast, joining us now live on the Lombardi Line. How are we doing? Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Doing great. Obviously, it's draft season, so there's nowhere I'd rather be than talk with you guys and talking some draft.
So let's talk draft. So is Caleb Williams, a lot of rumor about him being the first pick. Today, Louis Riddick announced that Jaden Daniels was his number 2 quarterback overall. Drake May's taken a beating so far. How do you have this all stacked up, Russell?
I'm with Louis on this. I think Caleb is the best quarterback in the draft, and then I have Jaden Daniels right behind him. And then Drake May as my 3rd-ranked quarterback, and my 4th-ranked quarterback is J.J. McCarthy. Much to Caleb Williams, the reason why I like him so much is just the arm talent, the arm angles, and kind of that backyard football style of play that he has. It really jumps off the screen. Now, he can get a little reckless with it, but I love it. And then you look at Jaden Daniels, I think he's so composed and so poised in the pocket. He stands tall. He makes some great throws. I love his skill set with the athletic ability. I think the RPO stuff that we see in the NFL is really going to translate for him. And I think there's going to be a lot of positives to his game if he goes to a place like Washington, if that's where he ends up going, with some NFL-made receivers like Terry McLaurin and the players that are there. So I would be very intrigued with him there in Washington. But, yeah, I'm with Louis on those top 2 quarterbacks for sure.
Caleb Williams, currently a $9 favorite to be that top overall selection in this year's draft. I'll be curious when we get through the combine and some of the interview process with teams, how things come out about his personality, because we just know what we've seen from afar with the nasty things that have been painted on his fingernails and maybe not talking to the media when people expect him to. But from a talent and skill standpoint, everybody talks about this guy being a potential franchise transformer. What have you heard about Caleb Williams behind the scenes, off the field?
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing that we're all seeing in the media. It's, the way he responded to certain losses on the sideline, that kind of a blemish, and obviously not talking to the media at certain times, but he can fix it. He can have a big week in Indianapolis and make a great case for himself for a lot of reasons to show that, yeah, he can be this franchise cornerstone piece. But he's one of those guys that I have to go off just the tape. I don't get to talk with certain players one-on-one. He's going to be one of those guys, obviously, unless something happens between now and the draft. But he is definitely one of those guys on tape that just checks a lot of boxes. And I think when you look at checking those boxes and the talent level that we see from guys like Pat Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Josh Allen and some of the things that we see arm talent-wise, I think Caleb checks a lot of those boxes. And I think he's going to have to come in and really perform in Indy. He's going to have a strong pro day. I'm curious if he's going to, not throw in Indy, but if he ends up throwing, I think that'll do wonders for his case. And obviously checking in, getting the height and the weight and all of those types of things that, we all kind of drool over those things. So it impacts the grade in a sense.
Well, I think, look, we know he's got a good arm. We know he's got good accuracy. I think a lot of it's going to come down to the intangibles in terms of where this thing goes to. But let's talk about the Bears. What would you do if they appointed you the general manager of the Bears? Would you keep Fields or would you take Williams?
I would be taking Williams. I think you've got a big enough sample size with Justin Fields. He's 10 for 28. That's his record. I don't think I can sit here and say, yeah, this guy's going to turn into a winner for me. Could he? Possibly. I think it's about getting the best value for him now. The moment you take Caleb Williams, the value for Justin Fields, it's like a car taking it off the lot. The value instantly diminishes and it's gone. So I think you try to get as much draft capital as you possibly can for him, whatever that capital may be. Maybe it's a day 2 pick. Maybe there's a team out there in the first round, like, Pittsburgh. Maybe they want to give up the 20th overall pick for him. I think you can try to do something there. So if I was Chicago, I'd be moving on. I'd be taking Caleb Williams at 1. And then potentially, depending on what happens between that and the 9th pick, I'd be looking to maybe move back from 9 if there's a team looking to move up for a quarterback, or maybe I take a receiver to kind of pair with Caleb Williams.
Yeah, and Michael, per our earlier
conversation, Stormy. We got to get those receivers in the first round, Stormy.
Okay, great.
Russell, how many receivers do you have in the first round? How many receivers do you have in the first round?
Yeah, I have 4. I have 4 receivers in the first round as far as overall grades. I think we could see as close to 6 going in the first round. But
of course we could. Early. We might see 8. We probably could get to 10. Why wouldn't we get to 10? The Chiefs just won a Super Bowl without Tyreek Hill 2 years in a row. We got to get to 10. Why not?
Yeah, no, again, we could see it. I'm a firm believer that the moment more teams watch the offensive linemen and some of the defensive linemen, they're going to go ahead and jump on board and say, okay, I can take this guy, an offensive tackle that might play guard for me. I can take him in the back end of the first round rather than that wide receiver. We all know wide receivers can be somewhat of a dime a dozen, but the top 3 guys, Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, and obviously Marvin Harrison Jr., those guys are talented and they're different from the other guys in this draft. I think Adonai Mitchell from Texas, 6'4", 195, the way he moves, really silky smooth for a player of his size, big catch radius. I like him as well, but I think the further you go down, again, Xavier Worthy out of Texas, I don't know if I'd put him in the first round, more of a speedster, vertical threat, run after the catch kind of guy. We get those every year.
Draft analyst at Fantasy Pros, Russell Brown, joining us here on the Lombardi Line. Now, listen, the quarterbacks and the wide receivers, those are the names everybody knows. But there's been a lot of talk about how good this offensive line class could be. Talk us through, I know it's still early, but some of the top offensive linemen that could go out there and maybe how many you could foresee in the first round.
I think this is where, the next couple of weeks is where we're going to start seeing guys shoot up draft boards. I think, Joe Alt's one of the 5 or 6 best players in the draft out of Notre Dame. Olu Fashanu, one of the 10 best players in the draft. I think his 2022 tape was better than 2023. But I like some of the flexibility you see from a player of his size at 6'6", 315 with his post foot, his set foot, the way he's able to transfer his weight. It's great. Talise Fuaga from Oregon State. He's going to be a big riser. I think he's going to test well. I think there's some guard flexibility there, but I still like him as an offensive tackle. And ultimately, I think we're going to see 6 or 7 guys that are going to go, and we could very well see 1 or 2 guys that are tweeners from the offensive tackle, interior offensive line. Those guys primarily Graham Barton out of Duke and Troy Fautanu out of Washington. I like both those players. I thought they played very well at offensive tackle. Wouldn't surprise me if the team tried to bring them in as an offensive tackle with potential to move inside to guard. But I think it's a great class for offensive linemen, and we're going to see a run definitely on day 2 for guys. But in the first round, teams are going to want that premier offensive tackle, and I think we see a run somewhere in the teams for that position.
There's no doubt that the linemen, that's what I was making the point of, is these linemen are going to go, especially since there's so many receivers and there's so few linemen that you get to be able to get to in the draft. So as you look over this, what player that you watched at the Senior Bowl, what really helped his stock move up the ladder?
From the offensive line group?
No, from anywhere, any
general?
position. I'm sorry, Russell. Any position, yeah. Who do you think just went down there and say, wow, that guy really helped his stock?
Yeah, that's Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo, the corner. I mean, 6 foot, 195 pounds. The closing speed that he has and the way he closes the gap between himself and a receiver is different of just about any corner in this draft. And without a true number 1 corner in the draft outside of maybe Terry and Arnold, I think it's really a wild card of who's going to be the first corner off the board. It's anybody's guess at this point. And Quinyon Mitchell could be that guy because of just how fluid he was. Outside of one-on-one rep with Roman Wilson at the end of practice on day 2, he did not lose a single rep from what I saw. I think he's a potential fit for a team like the Indianapolis Colts at 15. I could see him going as early as potentially 9 to the Chicago Bears if they want to add another corner, if they don't bring back Jalen Johnson. So I think the ball skills really jump off. 45 pass deflections, 6 interceptions over the last 3 years for this kid. He is as good as they come in this draft. And I think for teams looking for a true number 1 corner, I think Quinyon Mitchell stepped up in the big stage in the big moment in Mobile, and I think he made himself a lot of money.
Hey, Russell, thank you so much for doing this.
Awesome.
We appreciate it, and we'll certainly be checking in with you more as we get closer to draft day.
Appreciate it,
Thank
guys.
you,
Have a
Russell.
good one.
Russell
Yeah,
Brown,
thank
you
you.
can follow him on X as well. Follow all things fantasypros.com. He covers the draft as well as writes for the Detroit Lions Wire and hosts the Detroit Lions podcast. We ran out of time, so I didn't get to ask him about Lions-specific stuff, but fortunately we'll have him on again, like I mentioned, closer
Sorry
to
about
April.
that, Stormy. We got caught up on the draft.
I know.
We'll bring him back.
Let's look ahead to next year in a little bit of a fun, different way. Our producer today, Brian Ortega, came up with a great idea of kind of high school superlatives. You know, those high school senior yearbook awards that you get at the end of the year before you go on to college and do all the things. We're going to do that for the NFL. So let's start with this, Michael. Who is your most likely to succeed in the 2024-25 season?
You know, I loved, when they told me to fill it in on the rundown, I kind of went over it, and I thought your pick was really good. I would have probably liked that. I think Jordan Love is going to take a giant step forward to the Packers, and here's why. I really believe the second year in the system, you take a quantum leap. Look at what Brock Purdy did this year, almost 10 yards per attempt. He's going to take another leap next year. But I think Love, if you look at Love at the beginning of the year, even the game against the Raiders where really Matt LaFleur was protecting him, he was trying to not lose the game there. I think that he's going to take a giant step forward. And if the Lions, we should have asked Russell this, but we got carried away with the draft. If the Lions don't match that, this is going to be a very competitive division because they're good on defense. They've got cap room. They're going to draft well. And if he takes that step that I believe he's capable of, I think he's going to succeed.
I think that's a great point, especially because he is not a rookie going into his second year either. He's had time to learn behind Aaron Rodgers that I think he's more likely to make a second-year jump than have that potential sophomore slump type of thing that can happen to guys sometimes. I'm with you. And you look at what he did the back half of the season from that Week 10 win over the Chargers through their wild card win against the Cowboys. He had 21 touchdown passes and 1 interception. He was great. If he can have that type of accuracy and comfort with his receiving group, and we know how young that team is as well, I think the future is certainly bright for Jordan Love. My pick for most likely to succeed was Jim Harbaugh. I mean, we talk so much year after year about this Chargers team, and they're always predicted to be the one that goes toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes for the AFC West, and we're going to have that great Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes rivalry. No, they've had one playoff appearance, and it was a loss so far since Justin Herbert was drafted. And I think that Jim Harbaugh is the right guy to get this team over the hump. Bring in some physicality, give Justin Herbert the tools that he needs. I'm particularly excited just because Justin Herbert, despite having, the most passing yards through his first 4 seasons in NFL history, he's just 30-32. They're coming off a 5-12 season. He has not won. Jim Harbaugh is a winner, and I think he's more likely to succeed than fail even in year 1.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all in on the over total of the Chargers. And you know how I felt about the Chargers last year. I'm all in. I think he brings that element of toughness, and he's going to change the narrative of the team, and I believe that this is going to be the best thing for Justin Herbert's career because he loves, he takes good care of the quarterback. He protects the quarterback, but he also allows the rest of the team to play well. So I agree. I like it. I think to me, it's going to be interesting what the number is on their over total, win total, because I think it's going to be baked in by at least a half a game that he's going to give them that jump.
He's the favorite for Coach of the Year already for a reason, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so you remember back in high school, there's always that couple, that perfect couple that you think they're going to last forever. Yeah. It inevitably doesn't work out. Who is the most likely to break up in the NFL this year?
Oh, this should have been this line should have been Who's Brenda and Eddie? There was a great song by Billy Joel called Scenes from an Italian Restaurant where Brenda and Eddie were the popular steadies, and then they broke up after they bought the waterbed from Sears, which they don't even exist anymore. I think it's Carr and the Saints. I think this is headed. It's funny. Mardi Gras last night down in New Orleans, there was a parade. There was a boat, one of the floats coming through the town that had mocking Carr's inability to score in the red zone. He kind of took to it in a good-natured way. But once again, Carr's going to have to learn a new offense. He's going to have to play in a new system. He's going to have to learn. It's not going to be his fault, But I think there's so much heat on Dennis Allen, Derek Carr, the Saints team, and frankly, let's be clear. Has anybody really improved that much in the South? I mean, think about it, right?
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield went down to Tampa with no fanfare at all and led them to the playoffs, where Carr got $40 million and fell short.
Yeah, it was the Saints and the Falcons that were talked about so highly going into last year, and then it ends up being Baker and the Bucs that win that division once again. I went with the Jets and Robert Saleh. And yes, I think that Aaron Rodgers...
the best coach in the league. How could they get rid of him? He's the best coach in the league. Come on, Stormy, you're getting too hard.
I do think that Aaron Rodgers will get more than 4 snaps in 2024. I do think that. But I still don't think that it's going to work the way that Jets fans are so sold on it working. Saleh's 18-33 under Joe Douglas's GM.
That's 27
good,
isn't that good?
27-60 with Joe Douglas as their GM since 2019. They have a 13-season playoff drought, and you think this guy, after we see the Athletic article about all of the dysfunction that we didn't even need the article for because we were already very well aware, and I'm freelancing here, but that Nathaniel Hackett's kind of this useless frat boy guy, and he's only there because Aaron Rodgers is the actual owner of the team. My goodness. But I just, there's no way in my brain that this story ends up working. I cannot get there.
I can't either. I'm betting the under, and I think it's only going to get worse. I don't think it's getting better. I think it's going to get worse. Because, look, nobody said it, but when they fired the scout, Rex Hogan, what happened? Wonder, how did that happen? Was he all of a sudden the guy responsible for all the bad decisions? There's one guy that got fired from the Jets this whole offseason, but based on that Athletic column, we know somebody was leaking somebody in there. Somebody was Jimmy Altieri talking to the police. I don't know. I'm not saying it was Hogan. I'm just saying it looked kind of fishy to me.
Yeah. Well, and Woody Johnson said that he's been about as mad as he's ever been outwardly, and he said he thinks his team's got the message. So if they don't deliver, which I think that they inevitably don't, then a breakup is certainly on the horizon. Okay, from who we think is going to ruin things and break up and end their everything, who are you most excited to see next year? Which player are you most excited about?
Look, I think I'm excited to see Anthony Richardson. I know Elliott's not working today, but I am excited to see him just as Elliott is, because what the Colts were able to accomplish with Gardner Minshew, who now become a free agent, Richardson gives them that six-back offense. He gives them a dynamic player at point guard. And if he can throw the ball effectively with his size and power, and if he can stay healthy, wow. I mean, why aren't the Colts going to be a good team? Now, just so we're clear, the Colts have to change what they do defensively too, much like the 49ers, because this system has run to the end. This system has kind of gone to the end. And the Colts aren't as dominant as the 49ers are in their front. So it's going to have to go. But I'm excited to see Richardson. I really am. He should get stronger. Remember, this is a young kid too. He's not a big guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've talked about it a lot, that he's somebody that because of his limited collegiate experience needs those reps, and there were certainly some flashes. We know the athletic ability. Would love to see what's next for Anthony Richardson when he's fully healthy. You know who I'm excited to see also when fully healthy? Joe Burrow. Because if seeing Patrick Mahomes win another Super Bowl didn't motivate the hell out of you, I don't know what will. And Burrow, you look at the head-to-head with Mahomes, he's 3-1. The only loss, that down-to-the-wire AFC Championship. Yes, they lose their OC in Brian Callahan, now the head coach of the Titans, but you still got Jamar Chase. The rumor on the street is that they're going to franchise tag T. Higgins, so you still got your guys. I am particularly excited to see what Joe Burrow can do fully healthy. He's been to a Super Bowl, didn't get that ring, and he wants one.
If he might have been on that field, he's the kryptonite to Mahomes.
Yep.
I mean, let's be honest. He's won in Kansas City against that team. He's won in Cincinnati. So I'm with you on that one.
Okay, rapid fire for the last minute. We said most excited for a specific player. What team are you most interested to see next year?
I'm interested to see the Chargers, without a doubt. Most interested to see the Chargers.
See, and I'm most interested to see the Packers. So that was kind of a back and forth with who we had for most likely to succeed. So we're on the same page there, especially the Packers, such a young team too. And then how about this last one? Who's the most important year?
I think it's the Buffalo Bills, because I think, to me, they're going to watch the All-22. They're going to watch that game. They watch Buffalo. They watch Baltimore game. I mean, why not them? Why not them? And I think they're going to have a really hard conversation with themselves. It's going to be critical. I mean, McDermott has run out of coordinators to fire and people to blame.
They haven't quite had the failure of the Chargers in terms of wins and losses, but the expectations are always so high every year for Buffalo, whether it's Josh Allen, MVP, Super Bowl, AFC, all the things. They never seem to get there. So I agree, critical for the Bills. I said most important for the Dallas Cowboys. This final year of Mike McCarthy, last year of the contract for Dak Prescott. They can't get over the hump for that NFC Championship. This is a huge year for that organization.
Hey, the newsletter, to me, it just gets better and better. The man is a wordsmith, Bill A.D. The other day he wrote in there, which was one of the great lines. Probably I'm so old that I knew what he was talking about when he said that only if Mama Cass would have attended the first Super Bowl back in the day. So I sent him a picture of Mama Cass from the Mamas and the Papas. But he's right. I mean, had we known that, if we bring in a celebrity singer, it could enhance the game. But I think that newsletter, for me, it's such a great way to start your day in terms of what is on tap for the day, in terms of the betting community, in terms of our sports world. And I think it kind of gives you a narrower focus of what we have to accomplish and what you can go to your DraftKings apps to bet.
Yeah, Bill does a great job every day. And also, in addition to the newsletter, when you're a VSiN.com subscriber, you get an additional email, too, that has all of the hosts and guests for every single day, all of their picks. And that includes futures, whatever the daily bets are for certain games in the NBA, college basketball. Lots of great stuff that you can get here with our crew at VSiN. And now for us, we always try to stick with the larger theme of the NFL, of course. We're so grateful to have your expertise as a former NFL GM and you know so much about personnel that this Valentine's Day, we would like to, look at a couple of these head coach and quarterback new matchups for 2024-25 and see if you think it's a Valentine's match made in heaven or if, by the time the season starts, there might be a new Valentine in town. Let's go there. So, you know how sometimes we do like, love, hate? Let's do like, love, politely turn down this Valentine's Day. And we'll start with the Las Vegas Raiders. picking up on some of the conversation we had about Davante Adams. And do you think he wants to have his quarterback as Aiden O'Connell? I'm not so sure. What do you think about the combination of a defensive head coach in Antonio Pierce and his current quarterback in Aiden O'Connell? Do you think that they are the perfect Valentines? Do you like it? Do you love it? Or is this one that you think we're going to have somebody new come day one of the NFL season?
Well, I think Luke Getsy's the Valentine that's going to be under the most pressure because, we know Antonio Pierce, who'd never been a coordinator in the National Football League before, is really in the role to be the motivator, the organizer, the guy who's going to promote the team. Getsy's job is to get that quarterback. Now, Pierce was there with Daniels at Arizona State, recruited him, so he's got a background in the kid. I think Pierce is going to be the driving force with Telesco to try to find this quarterback. But the problem is, I'm not sure that anybody's going to give up 2 or 3 when you get to move up. It's going to be a challenge. There's going to be pressure on Pierce, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on Telesco. This marriage between Pierce and O'Connell, I don't think it's going to last very long. I think it's lasted only because they didn't want to put Garoppolo in the game. I think this is going to be the Brenda and Eddie relationship. It's going to break up.
Well, and I wouldn't get people's hopes up too much about Justin Fields either, because we talked about Luke Getsy and that connection there and how that could actually be a potentially...
I've done some work on that. Well, I don't think that one... I agree. I don't know. That one's not... I don't know if that's in the cards if some people within that building have their way. Let me just say that.
Sure. I think Russell Wilson maybe could be an intriguing name there with his current contract situation. On DraftKings, Russell Wilson plus 650 to take his first snap of the regular season next year with the Raiders. The Falcons are another interesting one as we have Justin Fields in the conversation because Desmond Ridder is the current quarterback, new head coach Raheem Morris, who we were discussing moments ago in News or Noise with the Bill Belichick conversation and Arthur Blank. But Desmond Ridder, I don't think anybody expects him to be at this point the long-term solution, and Justin Fields is a name that I've heard brought up a good bit for Atlanta.
Yeah, I think to me it depends on Raheem, what he thinks, having played against the Bears, understanding that. What Zach Robinson, remember now, this is the McVay system that they're bringing to Atlanta. Play action, heavy run, which fits what Atlanta wants to do. Could Fields play in that? We'll see. It could make some sense. The kid's from Georgia. He started his career at Georgia, transferred to Ohio State. So I don't think the Ridder-Morris relationship it's more in the Brenda and Eddie category. It's not going to last through the summer of 75. But I think Raheem and with the next quarterback will.
Let's go to Carolina, because from the time that Bryce Young was drafted, he was never getting Valentine's Day cards from his head coach, Frank Reich. What about Dave Canales? He's been very complimentary in his opening press conference about his excitement and the potential of Bryce Young. Could they be a perfect match this Valentine's?
I think they can be the perfect match. Now, I think to me, you're always wondering, is this going to be a long marriage or a short one? But I think for the short term, at least for 2 years, Canales has got a 6-year contract. He's coming in there to fix Bryce Young. He's coming in there to fix the offense. So I think this is the perfect Valentine's Day for both gentlemen.
You know which one on this screen I think is the best of the best Valentine's Day matchup? I'm sure you could steal it out of my mouth, but Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert. That is just chef's kiss.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. Yeah, they're going to get flowers every week. They're going to get chocolates. They're going to, they're going to have a box of chocolates. This is the Forrest Gump relationship with Jenny. We could put that in that category. The one that doesn't last here is the Mayo, Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi. You can scratch that off. You can scratch it,
Michael,
which is fascinating because.
I was going to say real quickly, let's go to your reference with the box of chocolates with the Patriots. You never know what you're going to get.
You never know, and you're not getting Zappi or Jones, I can tell you that. One of the things that people talk about, and this has come up, the Patriots haven't spent a lot of money. People think that, Belichick didn't want to spend money and Kraft did. One of the things was there was a strong contingency within that building. They were saving money for the Mac Jones 5th year. No more they need to save for the Mac Jones 5th year. They don't, or the extension. So I do believe that the Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi administration with Gerard Mayo is over with. I mean, they're going to draft a quarterback and life is going to go on.
Who of those young quarterbacks do you think would make the most sense? And I know availability is a big part of that, and if they want to trade up, which I don't necessarily foresee happening, but that's a part of it as well. But who do you think would be best?
Well, I think, look, the McAdoo, again, I think sometimes we label coaches based on what they did as a head coach, not based on what they can do. McAdoo is very good at evaluating talent. I've talked to him about a lot of quarterbacks in the draft. We've spent a lot of time going over it, and I think he really has a good understanding of what it takes to play at a high-level quarterback in the National Football League. So that's going to help Elliott Wolf as Elliott Wolf sorts through these quarterbacks. I think, to me, I haven't studied him enough, but Daniels certainly looks like he's got the skill set, whether he has the body or not. I need to watch more of Drake May. Brian Broaddus wasn't high on him the last time we had him on the show. Russell had him as his third quarterback. I need to watch because I do see some real talent in the kid. But I think, to me, if you are the Patriots, you have to pick the right one for you, and you're probably not going to be able to move up to get him. Look, let's face it. I mean, the Texans were sat there at 2 and got Stroud. Now, I know they picked Will Anderson at 2 and they traded up to 3 to get Stroud, but to me, you can go back and forth on that conversation. And they got the right player for their team. I'm not sure that Bryce Young isn't the right player. What I do know is Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi aren't the right player.
The Seahawks and Geno Smith, he obviously had a career year a couple years ago, earned the new contract extension. Now he pairs up with Mike McDonald. What do you think of that Valentine's match?
I like it. I really do. I almost put Mike McDonald as the most likely to succeed in our little block that we did the last hour. I think this is a good hire. I think he's smart. I think he's receptive to information. I don't know him personally, but just watching his behavior and seeing who he's hired on his staff, I think he's got a chance. And I think Geno has proven time and time again that he can improve. I think they're going to be a much better coach defensively. I think they'll be better offensively. And I think this Seattle team, I'm really going to be interested to see what their numbers posted at, because I think we've lost sight that they have more talent there than we led on to believe. I really think that.
And Michael, if you look on your TV screen from Adam Schefter, the Seattle coaching hires that have all been made official, any initial thoughts there on everything that's come through? Carl Scott, the defensive pass game coordinator, being the only holdover from Pete Carroll's staff.
Well, Ryan Grubb, I mean, he's going to bring a little bit of a dimension. He was the highest paid he was the highest paid assistant coach in college football last year at the University of Washington. So he's a very bright mind. We saw what they were able to do. Kalen DeBoer trusted him, took him to Alabama. He didn't get the head coaching job at Washington. Jed Fish did. But I think this is a good step. I love the Leslie Frazier hire because I think you need somebody with experience on the staff, especially as young as McDonald is.
It's time, Michael, for Palms Pressing 3. What do you got today?
All right, Michael, we've heard about and talked about the Chiefs and the 49ers ad nauseum. So I want to go back to Championship Sunday. Which of the two conference runners-up, the Ravens or the Lions, have a better chance of playing in Super Bowl 59? And what does each team need to do in the offseason to give themselves the best opportunity to make that happen?
Well, both teams need to remain hungry, right? So what happens to you when you've never been successful before is you have the disease of me. Armand St. Brown, they're going to redo his contract looking at $25 million. Okay, so they're going to redo golf. How's that all going to play out? How are they going to handle success? Handling success is the hardest thing to do in sports. I mean, you can just see it by everybody taking credit for the Patriot way of what's going on there. I mean, you got books being put out, you've got documentaries coming out, you got the Kraft saying that they have no involvement with football, but then when you read the book, they were involved with football. So when you win, everybody wants to jump on the platform. So that's a hard thing for Detroit. They've never won before. Baltimore, to me, their issues are, can they fix the staff? Can they replace Mike McDonald, who did a wonderful job? Are they going to be as good defensively? They lose two of their best players in Clowney and Van Noy, who they picked up off the street. So, and then one of their best defensive linemen, and I can't say his name, Justin, and he's from Texas A&M. He's a free agent. He's going to get probably the highest paid money unless they franchise him, which is too expensive to do for a defensive lineman. So, they've got a lot of question marks. I would say the one team sitting back who wasn't in the conference championship game, who's watched that game and said, this is really bad, is the Buffalo Bills. Because Buffalo had every chance to beat Kansas City. They had the ball last, right? They had a chance to get it to overtime. They had a chance to do everything they could. They had the ball for 37 minutes. They held the Chiefs to 22 minutes, even though they scored 27 points. They had ample opportunity, and I think their window is going to slightly close because they're got cap issues. They're not as good offensively. They got older. So it's a long-winded answer. I would say the Ravens because they've been there before, and I think they'll handle it better than the Lions.
Maybe, Mike, you think I'm crazy. I'd be a little bit more concerned about the Ravens, just thinking about they had the best defense in the league this year. Lamar's had 2 MVP seasons and nothing to show for it. Patrick Mahomes has more Super Bowl wins than Lamar Jackson does playoff wins at this point. They've both been starting since 2018. Like I would be a little bit more concerned about the Ravens, especially within that division, how you're getting the Bengals and the Browns back with healthy quarterbacks next year.
Yeah, I would answer the Lions. And if you look at it from a betting standpoint, obviously the Lions at 12-1, the Ravens at 9-1. I think the Lions had the 49ers beat in San Francisco in the NFC Championship game, playing their kind of football, and you get a fumble and you get this and that, and the decision, you don't kick the field goal, whatever. But I think they did everything. I think they're on this progression like the Cowboys were with Jimmy Johnson, where they've gotten a little better each year. They've gotten a little better. They actually should have been in the Super Bowl. Now, can they get back to that point where they're in control in a championship game? I don't know, but I'm pretty high on them. And I know the Packers are getting better, and the Packers are going to give them. But to Stormy's point, that division might have been the best of all time, and you had Burrow hurt, right? And now he comes back. Okay, question 2, Michael. How much credence do you give to the narrative that Kyle Shanahan can't win the big one?
0. Absolutely 0. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's the same narrative we heard from Andy Reid, 41 years old, his second year at 42. It's all over at every Wawa back here. When Andy Reid was the head coach of the Eagles, that's all we talked about. That became everything. Andy can't win a big game, went to 4 conference championship games, went to a Super Bowl. He can't win a big game. McNabb can't win a big game. And then the end happened. They got rid of McNabb. They thought they could go with Kevin Kolb. They signed Michael Vick, and that didn't really work. Obviously, Vick played for Chip Kelly too. But to me, getting to these games are hard. Like, it's really hard. We got 2 coaches in the Hall of Fame, Bud Grant and Marv Levy, who went to 4. We put George Allen in the Hall of Fame. He went to 1 and lost. So, I just think it's people with no knowledge of history or no understanding that the guy on the opposing sideline, the same rhetoric same narrative was talked about him. He can't win a big game. Big Red's not a good big game coach. He panics. Now, look, he does mess up. There's no game management. You can't argue that. Early in his career, he still calls timeout with 2:07 to go. But beside the point, he was able to overcome that. Even when he went to Kansas City with Alex Smith, he still had that knock on him. So I just think it's completely a ridiculous narrative. It's a narrative that happens when you win a lot, right? There's always something that is created when you win a lot. New England won a lot. Well, it's Brady, not Belichick. That's the narrative, right? There has to be some reason. This one is, Shanahan can't win a big game. I think it's completely wrong. I think you just stop paying attention to it because, look, the expectations when you win, the bar, who's setting the bar for you? Are you going to let people that have no understanding about the expectation bar, or are you going to set it yourself? And I think that's what Kyle has to spend his offseason just looking at that.
Well, hopefully Kyle's not like Andy Reid, where he has to go to another franchise to get those wins. Because
but Stormy, the franchise, all the fan base, got to get rid of Kyle. Who's a better coach than Kyle?
No, I'm not of that camp. I just know that it's made me personally sad that in all of those games you've had a 10-point lead and not won them. That it's made me sad, but I don't want another coach. I want Kyle Shanahan to win a Super Bowl with the 49ers, just not somewhere else like Andy Reid had to leave Philadelphia to get one in KC.
Tom Landry couldn't win the big one. Dean Smith couldn't win the big one. There's all these narratives. We'll see how history pans out. He's got a lot of time left, and he's health willing. His dad's still there guiding him. All right, final question, Michael, and this is one of the things I enjoy talking to you about here on your show. When the competition committee meets, Michael, what rule changes will they consider, and what rule changes, in your opinion, should they consider?
Well, I think they're definitely going to consider the ball going through the end zone is not the defensive ball. I think they're going to consider that one strongly. I think remember, the competition committee is influenced by the media. It's influenced by the narrative. I also think if they have any interest in safety, player safety, the tush push, they might want to think about that too. Because that's a lot of people getting pushed in a different direction. And I'm not saying they should ban the play, but I always felt like you couldn't aid the runner from behind. I thought that was a rule. Little did I know you could. So I think those are the two that are on, to me, that I see will be the most prevailing conversation, because especially the ball through the end zone, that seems to be everybody's conversation, right? Everybody thinks it's a ridiculous rule, and everybody, wants it changed when it happens to them. Everybody loves it when it happens to them on the positive side. So that, and look, I think I'm not sure about the overtime rules. Like, I don't know how I felt about that, right? We were going to play extra period anyway. If it would have been tied, we'd have gone to is that really what we wanted? Now, obviously the ratings are great, but we're talking about player safety. Now we're adding more plays. I wasn't in love with the overtime the way it was set up. I think, to me, it's a little bit everything. I don't want it to be based on the coin toss, but I also don't want it to be based on, okay, we're going to keep going. Actually, the college rule is, to me, I think you get more excitement out of that.
I just hope whatever rules are changed, that the players know what they are. That would be great.
Oh, that's your boy.
Well, I would say that they probably, if they paid attention in the meeting and they weren't sleeping or on their phone, they might.
I have one more. Can I ask Michael?
I'll allow it.
I have to ask this question, Michael, because I was mesmerized by your 24-minute interview on that Boston radio station, and you were comparing accountability in the profession of an NFL executive player development person with accountability in a radio talk show host, right? With this guy.
Right.
And he said, well, you're in the media now, aren't you? Isn't that your profession? And you answered, yes, I write books. Do you consider yourself now an author? Is that your main thing that you do in life?
That's what I like to do the most.
Yeah.
I think of myself. Today I'm going to interview Steve Pressfield, who wrote a book called The Daily Pressfield. He wrote the Bagger Vance book. I spend a lot of time in the creative world because I think that's the best part of my life right now. So yeah, I do. I don't see myself as a talk show to spin stories that have no relevance. And as I told that guy, he has no idea. My biggest regret of that interview was I should have used the Uncle Junior line. Some people are so far out of the race, they actually think they're in the lead, and that fits for him.
That was one of the most entertaining interviews ever. Like, everything this guy said, Michael just shuts it down. Have you been in the building? No.
Well, how
okay.
about when he thought that Bill's listening to him? How about he thinks Bill's listening to him? I mean, how self-serving is that?
So good. Mike Palm, thank you so much for doing
Mike.
this.
Thank you.
When you're an executive in the league, it's interesting. Everybody thinks the offseason is kind of low-key, chill. It's the worst because the season is structured. Monday you do this, Tuesday you do that, for Wednesday, Friday, you can take your kids out. Saturday you could have a date night. Sunday you got a game. Monday you have a game. Whatever it is, right? The off season is just completely chaotic. It could be Monday could be an unbelievable day. Tuesday could be something. You got this one project you're working on called the draft. You got this other project you're working on called salary cap. And then you've got free agency and you got your agents calling you constantly on the phone. It's really hard. It's a tough time to focus and concentrate on the task at hand.
It's all conjecture and wondering and guess and lying, which, speaking of which, shout out Brian M. on X, who tweeted at us for the lying season segment that we're going to put together. Michael has already started creating a list, so we'll have that coming soon to a Lombardi Line near you.
I got 5 things on the list already.
I love it.
And we just entered. I figured the day after Valentine's is lying, so we don't want to screw up the Valentine's Day holiday. So go ahead. What does Brian have for us?
So Brian suggested the title, Lombardi's Literary Liars, Fact or Fiction. That's good.
I love that. Yes. I love that. That's really good. I'm going to change that. And I think we could call a lie an embellishment, right? there's no Jesuit lawyers out there to condemn us to hell for lying just a little bit, right? So I think, to me, that would be an ideal situation. So there's embellishing going on here. I think Mike Tomlin loves Justin Fields as an embellishment. I think he might like him. I don't know if he loves him. Who loves, So I think there's a lot of but we're going to put embellishing into lying. We're going to say that. It's the same thing, right?
Very good. The Steelers, by the way, plus 310 favorite to land Justin Fields in 2024-25. We'll talk about...
Would you play that?
Well, no, thank you. But we'll talk about potential landing spots for Justin Fields a little bit later on in the show. I'll tell you what I'm not lying about is that Mike Somich will join us coming up in a little bit. VSiN host, professional handicapper. We'll get some of his plays, things he's looking ahead to. And in case you missed any of our one, by the way, of today's edition of the Lombardi Line, you can download it in podcast form wherever you get your podcasts. We do touch on the situation, obviously, in Kansas City as well as some other news that we have had over the last 24 hours, which includes, Michael, that the San Francisco 49ers, after 1 year with Steve Wilks as their defensive coordinator, have decided to part ways. Kyle Shanahan telling reporters on a conference call yesterday, scheduled 10 minutes before it took place, by the way, very similar to that Trey Lance conference call that they had last year. He said, quote, "It just ended up not being the right fit. It was harder than it needed to be." He said he felt very strongly that this was the decision that was best for the organization, even though it was one he didn't want to make. It was something that once he realized a different direction was what's best for the organization, it was something he had to do.
I said on Monday, if I were advising Kyle Shanahan on the plane ride home, I would be concerned about our blitz zero package. Are we good enough there? And I would be concerned about, do we have the structure defensively to handle the multiplicities of the offenses that we have to do? Those were the two things that hit me after watching the game. I wasn't obsessed with the decision in overtime and all that crap. To me, those were the two things. And then when I watched the All-22, I thought they had some good answers for blitz zero. I'm not sure that they understood the situation. I think there's some other things you can get into, but I also felt like they need to change who they are defensively. I felt like they need to get into a situation where they can play more man, where they can play zone, and they can play some man zone. Because here, look, zone coverage in football is predicated on the front. Let's go to Tampa 2, the invention of Tampa 2. Okay, Tampa 2 was invented because, they wanted a three technique, Warren Sapp, Keith Millard, somebody who could dominate up front and get up front and pressure the quarterback. They wanted four rushers. They wanted a right end that could really rush, Simeon Rice. They wanted a left end that could handle the run game to the left side of left side of the defense, to the right side of the offense, and they needed a nose tackle that could play the run. And then they were going to play zone with speed underneath, read the quarterback's eyes and play with speed underneath. And they were great at it because the front four was great. But what we found out over time is once that front four wasn't great, a lot of areas to throw the football in. And when the speed of the linebackers isn't great, there's even more areas to throw the ball. And Greenlaw's injury certainly affected that. So for me, I think ultimately this is a 35,000 feet decision by Kyle Shanahan. And the reason I think he had to make it is because if he went to Wilks and said, "Steve, where do you want to be with this defense? What would you do defensively?" If he didn't have those answers, that's hard. And he was with them all year. So he could gauge whether the defense was aligned perfectly, whether they understood their assignments, whether the communication was ideal. All those things matter. You're evaluating him as a teacher. Now, look, I'm not saying Steve's a bad coach, but I think it was a bad fit. And I think that the 49ers, for them to get over this hump, for them to get rid of this label of being, the runner-up prom queen, they had to make changes defensively.
So with that, if Steve Wilks is not the right fit, naturally the question becomes who is. And I want to throw this headline at you from a columnist at the Mercury News. The headline: "The 49ers should have one target for defensive coordinator, and you probably won't like it at first. I know, Michael, you won't. Brandon Staley could be to Kyle Shanahan what Steve Spagnuolo is to Andy Reid." What do you think about Brandon Staley as the potential defensive coordinator for San Francisco moving forward?
Well, show me the evidence why that would be true. Show me the Charger tape that says that would be true. I mean, show me where he was ever a good defensive coach for the Chargers. Like, show me where that would be cool. He called all the defense. See, this is what happens. Somebody throws a name out there with no evidence. See, this is what happens. This is why in draft rooms where, people say, well, Mike Vrabel's too intimidating or Belichick wants control. I could see a scout saying we should hire Brendan Staley. And then when Belichick would say, well, show me on tape where he's actually called a good defense and his defense has A, played the run well, B, communicated well, and C, won close games. And the answer to all those three are no. They're no. It hasn't happened. So, are you going to put – look, Sean McVay had him. He could have easily said, okay, Brendan, you were here before, I'll bring you back. He hired his college roommate, I think it's Chris Shula, not Mike Shula, Chris Shula, hired him back. So, I don't understand the love for Staley. There's no evidence to support that he's an elite defensive coach. There's just not. There really hasn't been. Now, can he become one? I would root for him. I'm all for him. I'm not against him as a human. But I'm just saying, give me the evidence. Show me the tape. Tell me where I can go watch this. Tell me where I can go watch it. I want to watch it. I want to watch what we would become. I don't see it. You say, well, he didn't have defensive linemen. Oh, really? He had Joey Bosa. He had yep. Khalil Mack. Where were they getting pressure?
Michael, I can throw out names too. Hey, Bill Belichick. Hey, Pete Carroll. You want to come over to San Francisco? Anyone can throw out names. From people. Yeah. Hey, talk to your boy Belichick. See if he'll go to San Francisco. Yeah, right. Okay, that's just what he wants to do. Right? Oh, what a dream!
I'm sure he was. He often said many times, the best job in football was being a coordinator because you didn't have all the headaches, you didn't have all the other stuff. But I think to me that's probably not the right fit either.
A girl can dream.
Because let me give you that. This is a perfect example. The stance of the 49ers defensive line, nobody would ever notice this, but the stances of the 49ers defensive front in that sprinter stance up the field is against everything that Belichick from a defensive principle believes in. A lot, holding the run, playing the gaps, being aligned perfectly. Now, I'm not saying they're right and he's wrong or he's right and they're wrong. It's just completely different styles.
Also, another thing these last couple minutes, which I don't think you can read much into. I think this is something we kind of already knew, but the Falcons had their new offensive coordinator, Zach Robinson, do his introductory press conference yesterday where he reiterated a lot of the thoughts that Raheem Morris and Arthur Blank both have, that all options are on the table when it comes to the quarterback position. Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke currently on the roster, but a spot that Arthur Blank has openly and publicly called deficient. What do you think that the Falcons should do at quarterback? Is there anyone interesting to you from that perspective?
Well, I could see them being involved in Justin Fields. He's a hometown kid from Georgia. Yeah. I think a lot of it's going to come down to pricing. I think that they're in position to take that contract on without promising him the $21 million of the fifth-year option that would have to take place a year from now. And you could see if it work out. I mean, to me, they both kind of need each other. And if Zach Robinson feels like he's comfortable around him, a lot of it's going to come down to Luke Getsy. What does Getsy think of him? What do they think of him really in the building in Chicago? Because there have been guys who leave the building. See, what I don't think the fans realize is when a coach leaves the building and goes somewhere else, he goes somewhere else, but he still has intel. Like, this isn't the CIA where you sign an agreement on confidentiality. When you leave, you're not allowed to talk to anybody, or every book you write has to get vetted by the CIA. Once you get fired from a team, you sing like a canary. I mean, you don't even have to ask 3 times like in Austin Powers. You can just ask once and they're going to tell you.
It's all connected.
I think to me, I
said it's all connected. I would love to be a fly on the wall of that conversation, by the way, in Vegas.
Oh, that's what happens at the Combine. The Combine's like, when I was a kid, I used to go at my grandmother's house after school, and there'd be all these old Italian women in black dresses because their husband died. They'd be gossiping in Italian. That's the Combine right there, except they're not in all black.
Oh.
Do you disagree with these takes?
No way.
No way.
Or do you approve?
Oh, no doubts. No doubt. No doubt in my mind.
No diggity, no doubt. It's time to ask Michael Lombardi. No way or no doubt?
That open never gets old. No way. Let's get into it, shall we? So, yeah. Michael, The big news of the last 24 hours with the San Francisco 49ers is that they have parted ways with their defensive coordinator, Steve Wilks. No way or no doubt, the 49ers defense regressed under Wilks' tenure.
No doubt. And the numbers back it up. I mean, as you saw the season, there were so many times where you could see them teams moving the football on them. Now, again, so we're clear, not all of this is on just the coach, right? It's players, coaches, and scheme. And so when you're making a decision like this, you're looking at the coaching. Okay, what are we teaching? Are the players relating to what we're teaching? Do they understand what we're teaching, and is there execution? Then you're looking, are the players, are we good enough? And you have to honestly say the defensive line underachieved. Now, I know Armstead had a bad knee. I know Hargrave had a thumb, but they did. And then you have to look at the scheme. Can this scheme hold up in the fourth quarter of Super Bowl games that are 5 hours and they're exhausted? So I do think it probably, for me, I said it after the game, I think they had to change defensively. I believe that. I think the Pete Carroll scheme, cover 3, rush up the field, get going, win with the defensive front, is great in the regular season. Not really, but it is. But it needs to have more variation. You just can't be. Bob Gibson didn't strike you out with just a fastball. You need 3 pitches to be a great defense in the NFL.
I completely agree, and I could be wrong in this thinking, but I keep on going back to the specific comment made by Kyle Shanahan in the call yesterday where he said it just ended up not being the right fit. It was harder than it needed to be, paired with the fact that Wilks has had 5 different jobs in the last 6 years, that maybe there's a relationship type of thing. I don't know if we end up finding more later, but there feels like maybe there's a little bit more to it, in addition to already it not being a scheme match. Let's stick with that. Go ahead.
The more you stay on that, before you go to the next one, the more you keep hitting that, and it just made me think. Sometimes when you're a head coach, right? You have an idea. Look, I want to play some 3, but I want to play 3 in the way we play it. You give that idea to the assistant, and then it's his job to then take that idea and make it better. And I think ultimately that's the best employees to have, is when you give somebody an idea and they make it better than what you thought. And I'm not sure Steve did that for Kyle, which might have caused the conflict, which kind of relates to what he's saying.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, Michael. Now, the team that was on the other side of that Super Bowl, the Kansas City Chiefs, are just continuing to cement their legacy, looking for a potential three-peat to be the first team in NFL history to do so. Now, Patrick Mahomes has been a stud. Now that he has won his 3rd ring, Michael, no way or no doubt, Patrick Mahomes at 28 years old is already a top 10 NFL player of all time. Where do you sit on it?
Having written Football Done Right, and I have gone through the top 10, I do think he is in the top 10 now. I mean, look, he's got that ability to close the game out, and those are what great quarterbacks do. His only kryptonite has been Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is able to, and last year he beat Burrow at home. So I think he's a top 10 player. He just has that ability to make his teammates better. Look, this year, he didn't put his team on his back, but he blended with his team. He didn't have to score 45. That's the dangerous part, right? He didn't have to score 45. All he had to do was play within the system. And the system allowed him a lot of easy throws. See, that's the other thing when we go back to Steve Wilks. There were too many easy throws for Mahomes. I took Mahomes on the over 26 completion on the Russo contest, and I hit. That was my number 1 for 60 points because I knew, and Russo looked at me like I was talking Greek. I said, Christopher, there's too many easy throws in the scheme. Too many. Whereas there were really no easy throws for Purdy. He was going to have to play against tight man coverage and put the ball where he needed to. And Debo dropped some. McCaffrey, they didn't execute.
Yeah, Russo, by the way, also extremely complimentary of Patrick Mahomes, calling him the best player that he has ever seen. And, of course, in terms of winning, if there's anybody that's going to chase Tom Brady down in those 7 rings, it looks to be, if he stays healthy, Patrick Mahomes. Let's stick with quarterbacks, because so much has been made of the teams that are quarterback needy and these young players coming in this year's draft. No way or no doubt, 3 quarterbacks will be selected with the first 3 picks of the 2024 draft.
I'm going to say no way.
Okay.
Only because I think there's such a love affair for Marvin Harrison that somebody might be able to just flip and move and still get a quarterback. it's hard for me to say this without having studied the draft and studied the players, which I plan on starting over the weekend. So I would say, look, all teams that are picking there need that. But if you're the Cardinals and you want the receiver, and you want, or the Chargers, and you want to get Harrison or somebody like that, maybe you could move a little bit and still get an upgrade, because the Cardinals aren't drafting a quarterback. We know this, right? We know the Chargers aren't drafting a quarterback. We know this. The Giants, if you listen to them, they ain't drafting a quarterback, right? And the Titans aren't drafting a quarterback. So there's play here. And if you're the Falcons, you're saying, okay, how do I get up there? I think there's a chance. I'm not saying it's probable, but you could jump. I mean, the Chargers could jump the Cardinals and end up getting the player they want, and the Patriots could move back and still get the quarterback.
Sure. Let's throw that graphic back up there, because pending any potential trade, to Michael's point, the current draft order, Bears with the top overall pick from the Carolina Panthers in that trade last year, the Commanders at 2, the New England Patriots at 3. At DraftKings, Caleb Williams is a $9 favorite to be your number 1 overall pick. Drake May out of North Carolina is a -180 favorite to go 2. And LSU's quarterback, this year's Heisman Trophy winner, +150, the favorite to go number 3 overall. However, if recent history tells us anything about the last time that quarterbacks went 1, 2, 3 in the draft, it was Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance. Only one of those worked out, and his future is still very TBD of how things will shake out in Jacksonville. So they're probably not all going to hit. I'm just going to throw it out there. Let's go back to Kansas City. The Chiefs, Michael, no way or no doubt, must re-sign Chris Jones to have an opportunity at that three-peat they want. He says he's getting more rings and that he's staying in Kansas City. What do you think?
No doubt. They need him. I mean, he makes everybody else a better player. And when he's interested, which he was on Sunday, he wasn't against Buffalo as much. I think, the Buffalo he played with high pad level. But look, the hardest thing to find, the 2 misnomers in the NFL that we talk relentlessly about that are not true are a number 1 receiver. There's very few of those who you have to double. A number 1 receiver is you must double him on every single play. That's a number 1 receiver. And so a 3 technique is also the hardest position to find, which made it insane that Atlanta took a running back over a 3 technique, because 3 techniques are impossible to find. They're impossible to find. 3 techniques that can rush the passer. 3 techniques that can get double-digit sacks. Those are hard to find. And so there's no one on Kansas City team. I mean, Mike Pennell played next to Chris Jones, and we're watching the game, and, Mike Pennell's been on about 6 teams, and all of a sudden he's playing at a higher level than he ever played. So they need Chris Jones back. And, he gave away all his negotiating rights when he said, I'm coming back. Now, I think alcohol plays a part in that, and so whatever said on parade day probably isn't true. But look, he wants to be there. I think that's sincere.
The exact quote, I need 3 of those rings, baby. We ain't done yet. We ain't done yet. Kansas City, we will be back here next year. And for those who want Chris Jones gone, I ain't going nowhere, baby. Woo! Okay, that wasn't the best Chris Jones I can do. Now, all that to be said about Kansas City, no way or no doubt, the 49ers are the rightful favorite at +550 to win the Super Bowl. Do you think KC should be favored, or is San Francisco in the right spot?
No, when you watch that tape, I think you made the point on Monday, I did. They were knocking them off the ball a little bit. They could run the ball. I thought their offensive line played better than I anticipated, especially inside. I thought they were more physical inside than I did. I thought that they did a better job. Chris Forster did a really better job of that. I think they can add some pieces that are not going to be expensive, right? I think they can add some pieces and make their team better, because the nucleus of their team is very good. And most importantly, Brock Purdy's only going to get better. He is only going to get better.
Prayers up that you are correct, Michael. I really, really hope so. Michael, it is time for our pro tip. We do these every day, every single show here at VSiN, trying to find some helpful nuggets that can help you at home become a more informed bettor. And we got a great tip from Mike Somich, who joined the show a little bit ago, Michael, talking about NFL futures. He said the only reason to attack NFL futures this point in the offseason is to get ahead of line moves. If you think money will be coming in on a particular team or play throughout the summer, bet it now. And his logic was, in this case, with the Kansas City Chiefs at a plus 750 price, he thinks that's just going to keep coming down. And by the way, shop around, because he got the best number I have seen. It's been largely plus 650 at other places.
Yeah, and I mean, I think to me that's part of it too. Is this again, as I learned from most professional bettors, it's always about the number. I mean, if you don't think the Rams are coming down from 35-1, why bet it today? Why that tie up all your money? But if you anticipated it going lower, and that's something where you have to anticipate what could cause it to go lower. Let's talk about that for a second, right? If a team had a huge signing, let's say, Buffalo signed Calvin Ridley and it gave them another receiver, that might move their number slightly, right? Or they sign Brian Burns to be the rusher. And I'm not saying they're going to do this, but there's free agents out there. I think those things can move numbers a little bit. Right now, these numbers are predicated off of what's happened on the field in terms of the coaches and the offensive and defensive coordinators. So that's going to be stagnant for a while. And then I think you look at what happens in the free agency. Remember, the draft doesn't move numbers. The draft is always about next year's team, not the team that we're talking about in 24. So don't panic about the draft. Don't put so many in the draft. Now, obviously, if they draft a quarterback like Houston did, they can improve their team. But for the most part, the teams that are like the Rams that have quarterbacks, the draft isn't going to move their number.
Right. The example I keep on thinking from last offseason was the Jets, and maybe it's a poor one because it didn't work out, but how many people got good numbers on New York with that ultimately creeping down because of the anticipation of Aaron Rodgers coming. And so it just slowly kept creeping down until he ultimately made the move. But again, 4 snaps in. That did not end up being a wonderful bet.
We saw a brilliant coaching job. To get that 7 wins. I mean, it was brilliant. So we know that. So they're right in good shape. Why wouldn't we bet? You and I are going to bet that over as soon as we can.
Oh, yeah. My favorite one on the board. VSiN.com, where you can find our pro tips. Once again, those searchable by sport and by show. That last one about the Jets, by the way, not part of the pro tip. Not part of it. Just keep that in mind.
No.
Speaking of quarterbacks, though. You love the GM shuffle? How about the QB shuffle? Looking at some next team markets for a few players. And we've talked a lot in pieces about Justin Fields. So let's start there because the Chicago Bears, as we referenced in that last segment, hold the number 1 overall pick in April's NFL draft. All signs point to a quarterback selection with Caleb Williams being that potential generational talent, that franchise player for your franchise. So that means Justin Fields, your 2021 first round pick, could be on the move. First of all, before we get to landing spots, what type of compensation do you think that the Bears could get for Justin Fields? Because we saw that report not too long ago. Schefter thought they could get a 1. Is it kind of more of a second and a third, second and a fourth? What do you think would be the best trade value?
I didn't understand the 1 because most of the teams that need a quarterback are picking down there at the bottom of the top of the draft. Would Atlanta give up they have the 8th pick overall? I mean, could you see a team like Seattle do it? I don't know. A lot of it comes down to, again, what the perception is. I mean, most people on Twitter would give up 4 number 1s to get Justin Fields. They wouldn't trade Justin Fields for Brock Purdy. So, what I got the sense, and probably I should add this, Brian, I'll add this in our exaggeration. I think Justin Fields getting a 1 might be an exaggeration, but it's out there, right? I kind of think it's going to be a 2 and something else. I think you got to go through it. I think it'll be attached to whether they pick up the 5th year. I think it'll be a little bit like Aaron Rodgers' deal, which had some escalators in it. It also had some de-escalators in it too, so based on playtime. I think it'll be one of those deals. Could Atlanta pull that kind of deal off? Maybe. But, I just get the sense that it's going to have to take a team that has a vision for Fields and feels really strong about it. And I'm not sure there's a lot of teams that have that.
So right now, the Steelers are the favorite at plus 110. We know Adam Schefter reported on the Pat McAfee show. Tomlin is a quote, big fan of Justin Fields. He did also mention in that segment, by the way, Ryan Tannehill and Russell Wilson. But the Steelers certainly not sold on Kenny Pickett being QB1. The Bears are plus 150 to just remain with his current team. But Atlanta, who you referenced, I think that's the most intriguing at a plus 550 price, a dual threat quarterback playing indoors in Atlanta with all those weapons. It's his hometown. A lot of people don't remember that he actually went to Georgia first out of high school before he transitioned to Ohio State. So I think that would make a ton of sense for a number of reasons.
Right. So I think when you're talking about Fields, you got to start with, okay, where can he be most successful? So let's take the Broncos. That's not going to fit for me because they do so much in terms of getting into the right play, doing the same thing with Minnesota. Like, that's not a fit. Same thing with Tampa Bay. They're going to spend money on Baker Mayfield. So you have to go to somewhere where you feel like, okay, the Zach Robinson, who runs the Sean McVay offense, all play action, under center, get him in the right protect. Is that fit Fields? See, everybody keeps throwing out this RPO stuff. Well, he's perfect in the RPO game. Well, what the RPO game is slowly dying. People are defending the RPO game really a lot better than they have 5 years ago. So are you going to be ahead of the curve or behind the curve? And that's what I kind of think is happening here a little bit. There's this rhetoric, oh, he'll be good in that system. Pittsburgh's going to be under center. You know, Arthur Smith is in shotgun, but it's going to be an outside zone, inside zone. That would work with Fields. Now, he's lived that with Ritter. Inaccurate, not able to make plays in the fourth quarter. I mean, this is why he was no longer the head coach of the Falcons.
So I mentioned the Steelers being the favorite for Justin Fields. The Steelers are also a favorite at an even money price for Russell Wilson next year. He's a veteran I'm sure a lot of teams would look at because he's going to be very cheap. $39 million in guaranteed money coming to him from the Broncos. So you could maybe sign Wilson for a veteran minimum deal. What type of interest do you think he'll draw, and what names on this odds board stand out to you?
Well, once he gets cut, once they get away from the guarantees and the Broncos assume all the liability and the guarantees, then he becomes an attractive player because you could pay him $10 million. He could actually end up getting a raise from this. You know, now, most of the time, and I don't know, I'd have to check on the language, but in his contract, if he does not have offset clause language in it. Now, Jake Delhomme had that in his contract, one of the most ridiculous contracts ever by the Carolina Panthers. Jake Delhomme could double dip. Most people can't double dip. Coaches can't double dip. But let's say Russell Wilson has offset clause in his contract, where if he goes to television, he has to pay the Broncos back. If he goes to, you know, any league, he's going to pay them back what he earns there. So the most he can earn is the $39 million, although it'll be fully guaranteed. And when he gets cut, the second year will go washed away because he won't be on the roster. So I think this comes down to, I would think the Raiders would be really a team that would be favored here, because I think the Raiders won't be in love with Fields. I think the Raiders want somebody that they feel very close to. Remember, when Wilson was available, the Raiders were one of his teams on his list. Now, maybe that was because of Gruden or not, but the Raiders are outside that draft area to get the quarterback. They need to try to win right away to keep up with the AFC West. And you know, for Russell, it's a way to get back at Denver. Because even though everybody thinks it's our harmonious right now, there's a lot of resentment in this, right? And I think, to me, the players always want to go somewhere where they can show up the other team.
And I think the Raiders, especially at that price, too, with everything you're saying, plus 650, is very attractive from that standpoint. My thing is, like, especially with the Steelers specifically being favored in this market, the Steelers are a team that has had for a while that like quarterback away moniker because of the talent that they have. Well, the Broncos thought that they were a quarterback away when they signed Russell Wilson, and clearly that has not worked out. So do you really want to go down that road with the same player that it didn't work in another franchise? I don't know. I don't like that pairing personally.
I don't either, and I think the other misplaced price team here is 12-1 Titans. They're no interest. I mean, you can already hear Brian Callahan talking about how much he loves Will Levis. You can hear Nick Holt, the new offensive coordinator, talk about how much they love Will Levis. Nobody walked in that building. Trust me on this now. Nobody walked into that building in Nashville and said they don't like Will Levis. They said they love Will Levis. There's no way they're going to sign Russell Wilson. So that 12-1 should be 120-1, Stormy.
We didn't get a chance to get into Kirk Cousins, but another free agent this offseason that we'll discuss another day. Great show as always, Michael. Appreciate you, pal.
Thank you, Stormy. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
You too. See you Sunday.